The story begins under a blue sky with slightly overcast clouds, and pink petals floating through the air illustrate the scene where two characters stand on the school balcony. In a dialogue worthy of a Mexican telenovela, the girl confesses that she's had feelings for the boy in front of her for 2 years. In response, he stares back with a bewildered expression, like a surprised Pikachu. Apparently, he has no idea who the person in front of him is and makes a point to mention it. Peering through his fog glasses, he's talking to Park Rosa, at the peak of her 18-year-old youth, the female lead of this mess, so she's not just anyone. Considering that, Rosa uses her protagonist powers to break the fourth wall and inform us that her 2-year unrequited love has just gone down the drain, while the guy, not wanting to face the girl's bitter posture, leaves the balcony in a cold sweat without even offering a decent goodbye. As a tear rolls down from Rosa Parks' left eye, we know her fragile little heart has been shattered. Kneeling in a gesture of deep suffering, she thought she'd be fine if she were honest with herself and trusted her feelings, only to find out the guy didn't even know who she was. Faced with the harsh reality crashing down on her head like a uranium brick, the girl cries from every possible orifice, while the growing shame running through her veins gives her a sudden urge to throw everything to the wind. Much like when your mom screams she'll disappear one day and no one will miss her because you forgot to do the dishes. But do you think that's the end of the story? Think again, sucker. There's always room for one more little drama in the life of a bitter young woman. In Rosa's case, just when her emotional TNT was ticking down from 9 to 7 seconds in exactly 2 seconds, what Miss Rosanya didn't expect was for her school to suddenly explode out of nowhere. The explosive goes boom, and the school collapses without warning. Rosa begs for help, telling the Lord Jesus she was just kidding when she said she wanted to blow everything up, but it seems luck wasn't going to knock on her door today. The clueless students around her begin to notice the deafening noise taking over their senses, as Rosa is thrown from the balcony by the blast. One of these students, Doryeong, jumps in without hesitation to help. Meanwhile, Rosanya falls in slow motion toward her inevitable death, wondering if her demise really had to be so pathetic, spinning in the air like a lost paper airplane, right after being rejected by some ungrateful jerk. However, Doryeong prevents Rosa Parks' tragedy with a strange ability that glows golden from his hands, which he uses to block the debris that would have crushed the poor girl. Not only that, but if we look closely at the bottom of this enormous panel that we had to divide into several takes, we can see that the guy was actually flying. Yes, he didn't just act as an umbrella for the concrete storm, but he also prevented our heroine from becoming a pile of ground beef after a motorbike courier was hit by a truck. After safely placing the girl back on the ground, the flying student listens to Rosa's heartfelt thanks for his unexpected help. What's more, this guy is a total gentleman, asking if the rescued girl got hurt in any way. Rosa Parks, still terrified by the situation, assures him she's fine, right as the brave Doryeong is called away from another corner and rushes off to save the rest of the day. It was a woman in a peculiar uniform, pointing toward an alley where someone had gone, and scolding the guy for wearing his school uniform while on duty. Stunned, Rosa Parks is drawn without eyes in this panel, overwhelmed by too much information in such a short time. However, once she regains her emotional composure, she collapses to her knees again, but not from pain this time. This time, it's because she's fallen head over heels for the Korean Superman who just crossed her path. 2 years later, a young lady named Sei was streaming to her devoted fans after a long hiatus from the screen. She told her frenzied chat that she had finally finished her exams, when some idle viewer reminded the girl to wear her watch. However, the reminder was justified because, indeed, she needed that accessory securely on her wrist. After all, it was an important piece of equipment for special agents like Sei, and she wasn't supposed to take it off, not even during a shower, as it indicated the exact time when agents should use their abilities. In fact, as the president of the Special Agents Headquarters had already said, Sei not only needed to wear the watch at all times, but also had to learn to use it in a controlled manner, not like the psycho lunatic she usually was. Nervous about her delicate mental state, Sei explained to her fans that special abilities were used as weapons, which is why they should only be used during work hours. Displaying the watch, she told them that if it rang, it meant heads would roll. And speaking of which, the girl remembered an appointment and abruptly left the live stream without further explanation. On the other side of the city, a crowd gathered around a building, and people pointed to the top and filmed as if they were on a safari, though the situation was even wilder. Someone was teetering at the edge of the balcony. A guy screamed that Tamer still didn't have a world title and warned that if anyone approached, he'd chop up the hostage he was holding. The mysterious woman who had summoned Doryeong to the alley now responded through a megaphone, telling the criminal to come down right away if he wanted to reduce his sentence. At the same time, internally, she gritted her teeth, wondering when those superpowered knuckleheads would finally show up. However, just like in a good superhero movie, the first heroine made her appearance, and it was none other than our beloved Sei, flaunting her K-pop star look for all to see, being cheered by the crowd and promising autographs only after lunch. The fiery super gives her colleague a scolding because she had told Sei not to stream today and to be ready for action, while Sei justified that she had hopped on the bus as soon as she heard about the situation. The fiery one snaps that this isn't her mom's house, grumbling that even Ki Jungi hadn't shown up for this mess. Sei asks about the twins, but apparently they were in the middle of exams and had to miss work. Setting that aside, the woman orders the heroine to take a look and use her clairvoyant power to see what's about to happen, as detailed as in the Final Destination franchise. Sei takes a peek and confirms that the two maniacs will fall together and turn into pancakes in 10 seconds. With that, she begins counting down, and the boss flies straight up to the top of the building, cursing the girl for not arriving earlier when things weren't as dire. Using her fluidization ability, Special Agent Jang Seon shoots upward toward the criminal, who tries to warn once again that they should keep their distance, but he loses his balance and ends up tumbling, causing both himself and the poor hostage to fall. Faced with the facts, Jang Seon hurries to clean up the mess before it's too late, but she feels she won't be able to manage. However, once again, Doryeong steps in to restore order, freezing the fools in midair with one hand behind his back, like a noble waiter serving a hungry customer. Jang Seon, on the other hand, was starving for a solution, and that's exactly what the blonde hottie delivered in style, packing up the thug for the cop like she had ordered him on AliExpress. Jang Seon reminds him that he was supposed to be on vacation, but with his telekinesis and self-healing abilities, Han Doryeong simply couldn't stay out of the action. Knowing full well how special he was, the guy offered to help the woman, who promptly declined and entered the building through a window. Around them, the crowd stood in awe, watching as the heartthrob landed on the ground in an extremely cool vibe. In that moment, the people forgot everything and rushed toward the hero. Someone in the crowd had an exam tomorrow, so they wanted to touch the guy, hoping it would bring them good luck, as if Doryeong were a totem, a good luck charm, or even a god. But who is Han Doryeong? First of all, we need to understand that the number of criminals with special abilities has skyrocketed. As we can all imagine, ordinary police forces can't handle this troublesome crew. Obviously, special criminals require special solutions, and that's how the Special Agents Headquarters was founded. After all, this is a crazy world where someone, even with just a single ability that defies the norm, can become an agent ready to defend society from these sinister lackeys. In Doryeong's case, the guy was born under a lucky star. From birth, he had two abilities, and with them, he saved his school when he was still in elementary school. By middle school, he had saved the entire country. Without a doubt, he's the most special agent of them all, and the Republic of Korea is safe because this blessed individual exists. But of course, being a hero isn't just about being born with powers. To top it off, this Galaxy-class dude is also the hottest guy in Korea, not to mention his captivating charm and charisma. Without a doubt, with his unrivaled personality and stunning appearance, Doryeong was more adored than K-pop idols. In the chaos of the crowded building, people trampled over each other to get a piece of the superhero and wondered why he was even there, as it had been publicly announced that the celebrity was on vacation. However, after witnessing the crime from his window at home, Doryeong decided to swing by and casually rescue the hostage and subdue the armed suspect. Jang Seon wanted to know if the higher-ups had given him permission to use his powers, and he nonchalantly replied that the folks in charge loved that he was working even during his vacation. Hiding behind Jang, Sei popped out and commented that the handsome guy was going to blow up on Twitter, but not as a compliment. In fact, the girl was bitter because she wanted to be the one trending this week. Unfazed by the jealousy of his rivals, Doryeong simply responded that Sei would get there if she worked hard enough. After all, as the rich cousin would say, there's no poverty that can withstand 14 hours of work, and if you work 24 hours a day, every day, maybe you'll become as successful as him. Assuming you don't die from burnout first, of course. With that said, the golden boy whistled nonchalantly like a cricket, while Jang tried to stop Sei before the cameras captured an unexpected agent showdown. Jang tried to slow down the cocky guy, asking if he hadn't been a little too overconfident lately, reminding him that at the start of his career, he used to let people fall from the sky like a kid dropping a glass bowl. Doryeong didn't quite get where she was going, so she spelled it out for him. What would the arrogant hero do if he faced a villain stronger than him? Or maybe it wouldn't even be a villain. It could be a villainess too. We don't want to be accused of sexism here. Or worse, it could be a villainess with an insanely powerful ability, one that's beyond our comprehension, utterly, terrifyingly powerful. Regardless of that, Doryeong was sure that would never happen, and the audacity of this prick gave Sei an uncontrollable urge to smack him. However, as the trio of tension tossed their words into the wind, the feared fourth element dropped onto the scene, having evaded the agent's senses and arrived unnoticed. There stood the most feared villain of the group, facing the heroes. Sei found the gas mask kind of tacky, which I personally agree with, but the villainess wasn't in the mood for jokes. She didn't even let Sei finish criticizing her outfit before she swooped in and landed a massive punch, sending the girl flying. Stunned, Doryeong found himself face to face with a masked figure, and with a slight hint of fear on his face, he asked who this mysterious individual was. Setting aside that question, one thing is clear. If Sei kept flying without direction, she was bound to crash into a construction beam and break her appendix. Knowing this, Jang Seon rushed in the direction where the girl would fall and acted as an airbag, absorbing the impact as they smashed through the window of a building and into an unsuspecting office worker's desk. Completely ignoring this, Doryeong commented that he might not know who this villain was, but if they were caught by the special agents, they'd face up to 3 years in jail and a fine of 30 million won. However, the villainess didn't seem too keen on staying behind bars. As soon as Doryeong placed a hand on her shoulder to immobilize her, she escaped his grasp, surprising him with her boldness. Not one to let it slide, he hurled a park bench at her, but she caught the projectile with impressive skill and threw it back with equal force. The gas mask was blocking her vision, causing the bench to miss its mark and fly off course. But a splinter from the wooden piece struck the hero, leaving a small cut on his angelic face. In disbelief at what had just happened, Doryeong glanced back, reflecting for a brief moment on the event. As his secondary ability healed the small cut, he lost his temper and began throwing everything he could find in the villainess's direction. Street lamps, traffic signs, a cat, a dog, anything. The entire city's metal debris hurtled toward the enemy, who seemingly lacked the reflexes to avoid getting crippled. Soon enough, a pile of street junk buried the villainess, making Doryeong certain he had finally caught her. However, upon closer inspection, he was filled with the bitter realization that the villainess had escaped and vanished completely. A few hours later, Sei was recovering in a public hospital after suffering a lumbar fracture, so she took advantage of her downtime to check in with her many fans during her second live stream of the day. Everyone expressed concern for their idol, and she assured them she'd catch that wretched villain as soon as she completed her physical therapy. Meanwhile, Jang Seon was killing time playing Candy Crush on the rock-hard hospital chair. One idol viewer asked when their favorite heroine decided to enter the superhero biz, so Sei asked for all her followers' attention, lovingly called Pupsius, so they could hear this story. Sei began her super career back in elementary school, when she discovered her clairvoyance ability during a test. Having forgotten the wretched quadratic formula, the young girl was ready to throw in the towel and drop out to start an OnlyFans. However, an odd sensation overcame her, as though her future self was scolding her. Faced with this peculiar situation, her brain throbbed until she turned into the Joker, and it was in this Joker mode that Sei used her ability for the first time. Unfortunately, not yet fully aware of her own power, the future heroine ended up getting scolded hard, and her newly sprouted wings were clipped by the traditional school system, the true villain of this story. As Sei wrapped up the first chapter of her saga, she noticed the approach of the last person she wanted to see. Yes, it was none other than Han Doryeong, bringing his worn-out face to the live stream and stealing all the attention for himself. Not only for his good looks, but also for his national hero status, Doryeong was admired by the entire population, and Sei's fans knew the story by heart that Doryeong was born with his abilities. Jang Seon, on the other hand, took a little longer to awaken her powers during a school sports competition. The twins had their revelation in kindergarten. But of course, this fictional Korea isn't just home to heroes. Those blessed or cursed with extraordinary abilities don't always choose the path of peace and justice. Some are drawn to the dark side, and others take so long to discover their powers that they may live an entire life in mundane routines until suddenly taken by this strange, superhuman capability. It's worth noting that the moment of awakening one's powers varies from person to person. For instance, the so-called late bloomers are the ones who take the longest to manifest their abilities. On that note, The renowned late bloomer who had just thrown the special agents into a frenzy remembered Doryeong's touch on her shoulder. She placed her hand over the spot where he had touched her, and, brimming with emotion, Rosa Park, now 20 years old, whispered that he had really touched her. In other words, as we can see, this will be the second case of unrequited love for this exemplary species of female simp. 2 years ago, little Rosanya spent her time stalking the social media accounts of the most famous heartthrob in South Korea. Like every other girl her age, she had a crush on the agent, and Rosa's admiration was so immense that on that day, she decided to save one of his photos on her phone. For this and many other reasons. Most of the honor ceremonies held for Han Doryeong took place outdoors, precisely because his fans were the craziest people on earth, unwilling to let the cop live his life without hearing their loud screams and smelling their armpit stench in a large gathering. Speaking of which, the physical separation between the idol and his fans was so pronounced that the guy wore an isolation suit to keep the crowd at bay. At one of these ceremonies, Rosa Park was there, sneaking through the masses trying to get as close as possible. After all, she wasn't just an ordinary admirer. Far from it. In Rosa's case, she had been literally saved by the hero himself. What the innocent girl didn't know was that in front of her stood a group known as PHS, or People Saved by Han Doryeong. This acronym originated from Doryeong's Fan Cafe, a website where fans could communicate with the idol. The harsh reality was that Park wasn't special. She was just one among many. As she bumped into people and forced her way toward the superhero, a man scolded her for thinking she was the only one there and told her to respect the space of others. Rosa's first reaction was to stop and apologize, momentarily giving up on trying to push her way through to avoid getting slapped around for free. Nevertheless, the brave fan had taken a crowded bus next to a construction worker who hadn't used deodorant after a hard day's work to get there, so giving up couldn't be an option. With that in mind, she mustered her courage and resumed her original plan. Ironically, 2 years after that event, Rosa Park still harbored the same desire to be close to Han Doryeong, but this time, with some darker methods to get what she wanted. On the day of that ceremony, under heavy rain, she felt as if she'd been struck by lightning. With the surreal strength that came from it, she threw the man who had scolded her far away, even though that hadn't been her original intention. Honestly, I don't know how the hell she did that by accident. It doesn't seem physically possible for her to hurl the guy without meaning to, but oh well, maybe I don't fully grasp the complexities of her newly awakened power. Just like me, the people around her gaped in shock as the guy flew aimlessly through the air. Sweating from her eyes, little Rosanya had no idea what to do or not do in such a unique situation. Deep down, an irresistible urge to disappear was growing inside her with every second she remained in that unprecedented embarrassment, until her body obeyed the urge and she vanished without a trace. After being flung to Kingdom Come, the special girl landed hard on the green grass of a beautiful field, where her feelings of confusion accumulated until they manifested in a scream. "What is this?" Rosa Park shouted, her voice rising. "Well, allow me to answer. It's super strength and teleportation. That's what it is. These are our anti-heroine's 2 abilities." And she starts to wonder if she's dreaming, given the sheer confusion in her mind. Of course, considering she had probably killed a family man by turning him into a human frisbee, we can understand her state of insanity. But it wasn't just her physical strength that had increased significantly. For some inexplicable reason, she could now see clearly without her glasses, illustrating the profound transformation her entire body had undergone. At the honor ceremony, Park Rosa sprinted there unintentionally, weaving through the PHS crowd unseen, wearing a blowfish-shaped mask. She was lucky enough to find Doryeong, but unlucky enough to see him right in the middle of a fight with another villain wearing a mask. As if that weren't enough, Rosa got hit by the toxic smoke the villain emitted, causing her to vomit up an entire rainbow without hesitation. Clearly, staying close to Doryeong was a more dangerous job than being a prison guard, but Rosa never gave up. Equipped with a gas mask now, she felt ready to overcome a new obstacle to be by her beloved side. Not long ago, she had been rejected by an unrequited love, but the bitter lesson from that ordeal might be the path to learning what she needed to avoid making the same mistake again. She had to make it work and wouldn't give up, not even if a car ran her over. In the next panel, she gets hit by a car, but the real victim was the vehicle, which crumpled like a sponge from the impact. To finish the job, she tossed the car far away, not caring if there was a kid inside. That's right, it happened and it's done. Afterward, assessing her health post-accident, her body didn't hurt in the slightest. 2 years later, Park Rosa was the only one who didn't know something was wrong. As a result of her little intervention against the law enforcement agents, the villainess was now the hot topic at the special agents headquarters, and the president called for an emergency meeting about this new S-class threat. Respected by the entire institution, the experienced Choi Gilbey, whose power remains a mystery to us, began crafting a strategy to capture the culprit. By the way, he mentioned that Ki Jungi had shown up today, which was the best decision he could have made, considering he'd be booted if he missed one more meeting. Ki Jungi, another agent whose ability is still unknown, apologized for his previous absence, but lightened the mood by confirming that this time, the number was right. Not paying much attention to that strange remark, the director asked why Jungi hadn't shown up the last time he was called. The young man explained that he had indeed shown up at the crime scene, but turned right back around and left as soon as he saw Sei. After analyzing the situation, he concluded that 2 versus 2 was the perfect symmetry for the case. But then Doryeong appeared, and in a strange reaction, Ki Jungi fled out of sheer fear. Because of this, he now had it in his head that he needed to win at all costs. Fed up, Choi dismissed the subordinate from the screen so the meeting could proceed. Returning to the topic, he resumed his talk about the mysterious S-Class special, who had already made a big splash. This was the first S-Class villain to emerge in 52 years, someone so powerful that even Doryeong couldn't handle it. Ki Jungi interrupted the president's speech to adjust the projector, which was shaking a bit. Even more exasperated with the kid, Choi rephrased his thoughts once again, eventually concluding that they needed to give this criminal a name. He asked for suggestions, and the crowd raised their hands to throw out some ideas. There was Black Gas Mask, Boring One, Techno Villain, Weirdo, Savage, Smoky Mouth, Cyberpunk Assassin's Creed, Sewer Cleaner. All sorts of ridiculous, tasteless names. None of the names pleased the boss. That's when Doryeong suggested Black Mask. But Choi decided to keep the blonde out of the name picking because he had let the villain escape. Moreover, it was clear the villainess was only targeting Doryeong. So the president hoped to keep him safe from future incidents by assigning a special team to capture Black Mask, without Doryeong's involvement. Outraged, the famous special agent insisted that he was more than capable of solving this case. After all, he wasn't just any old nobody, he was Han Doryeong. Nevertheless, his tantrum didn't get him anywhere, so the hero vented his frustration through apathetic sadness. Sei appeared with a Fanta to console the big boy, advising him to take his vacation properly and let people forget about him for a while. After the brief chat, the young idol found himself alone again, reflecting on this fateful event that seemed to have turned everything upside down. Thoughts of worry swirled in his mind. What if I really am the target? What if I lose this fight and put the whole world at risk? What if I quit everything and become an Uber driver in Shichue in the interior of Bahia? Ironically, Doryeong felt like he needed to be saved for once, in a rare moment of vulnerability. A long time ago, in a distant memory of his childhood, young Doryeong was on the verge of being crushed by the rubble of a collapsing structure. Due to the weight of the concrete and his inexperience with his telekinesis power, the boy knew he wouldn't be able to hold up something so large and heavy, and this hard truth made him give up and brace for the end. However, a man appeared at the last second and obliterated the debris that was about to fall on his head. That mysterious stranger, with his large hoop earrings and a shirt that read love, asked the child if he was hurt after saving him. Deep in his heart, where part of Doryeong's childhood still lived, the boy yearned for that person to show up again. But when the Thundercat watch on his wrist chimed, he scolded himself for being weak and donned his uniform once more to return to work. As he liked to remind himself, he wasn't just any special agent. He was Han Doryeong, the best. Hours later, on a rainy night, in a bedroom filled with obsessive posters of the country's most famous law enforcement officer, Rosa Park finished writing her letter addressed to him. As she fantasized about Doryeong's possible reactions upon reading her note, Rosanya overheard the news report that at around 3 p.m. today, a group of criminals with special abilities appeared at the SY Bank. Earlier that day, the storm was already raging across Korea, where the aforementioned bank was under attack by 2 thugs, taking advantage of the publicized news about Doryeong's recent failure against the mysterious villain. One of the men believed the agent wasn't the same anymore, and they could exploit this weakness to pull off a larger crime. On the other hand, his partner didn't share this view, as the fear of being crushed by the cops still weighed heavily on him. Either way, the more confident criminal insisted that this was the perfect time to unleash chaos with his small but powerful explosions, while his partner would contribute with his humble mutations. With that settled, it was time to test their resolve because standing right behind them was none other than the person they were talking about, Doryeong. He asked who was spreading the rumor that he had grown weaker, and the small explosion guy did his part by trying to blow the cop's face off. However, of course, the blast didn't even mess up the hero's hair, and he mocked the criminals, asking if they really thought they could beat him with such puny abilities. He then announced that running was useless. Doryeong was going to catch them all. With that, the agent terrorized the terrorists with the objects in the room he could hurl, until Ki Jungi appeared, asking if Doryeong was planning to kill them by any chance. Hearing this question, Doryeong came to his senses and apologized for losing his temper. His colleague then took charge of escorting the criminals to the police station. After exiting the bank with the two offenders, Ki Jungi ordered another agent to take them to the police department while Doryeong observed the scene with a blank, reflective expression. Inside, he thought there was no more room to show weakness, as his new rival could appear at any moment and exploit his vulnerabilities. And speaking of the devil, Black Mask appeared like an apparition before the special agent, who vowed to arrest her right then and there. Inside that sweaty, tight mask, Rosa Park wondered what to do, realizing the guy was looking straight at her. Hours earlier, Rosanya had written her letter to the heartthrob, referring to herself as the one he saved, as if the guy didn't have 300 other blessed fans in his DMs saying the exact same thing. But that's the thing. It's easy to send a message, but confronting someone face-to-face is a different story. Clearly, the girl had mustered the courage to show up in person, but her mask hid all the shame and turmoil of her emotions, making Park freeze in the presence of the one she so admired, respected, and wanted to see shirtless. Suddenly, the guy began walking toward the girl, giving her the certainty that this wasn't a dream. After all, the fear she felt from his approach was very real, as was her desperate need to keep her emotions in check at this crucial moment. Adding to Rosa's anxiety, people were gathering around the two, becoming spectators of what had the potential to turn into an epic showdown. On one hand, Doryeong clenched his fists with unrestrained force, expressing his anger toward the opponent who had made him taste bitter defeat. On the other hand, Rosa Park battled her shyness, preparing to finally confess what she had come to say. And so, after a sudden surge of courage, Rosanya shouted, "I've liked you for 2 years, ever since the day you saved me." At this awkward moment, Doryeong froze mid-step, turning into a wax statue as confusion took over his body. Around him, the other special agents mirrored his reaction, sharing the same baffled expression. As Rosa shouted her love for the story's heartthrob, more people gathered around, eager to witness their favorite agent defeat the villainess who had supposedly beaten him. Making it very clear with his thought bubble full of question marks, Doryeong was the embodiment of cognitive dysfunction, and so he tried to ease his ignorance by asking what the villain had just said. Apparently, he hadn't heard anything. Meanwhile, Rosa was shouting louder and louder, but the storm made it impossible for anyone to hear, and her voice was muffled by her mask. Ki Jungi ordered the sirens to be turned off to make it easier to hear, while the crowd murmured about what could possibly be happening. Every little detail made it harder for Rosa to get her message across. She also suffered interference from the vehicles passing by, making their usual racket. Not known for having much luck, Rosa Park had experienced other unlucky days. One afternoon, she had prepared a bouquet of flowers for her famous crush, sneaking through the square to deliver it and pour out all the feelings she had for him. At that moment, Doryeong was alone, and Rosanya saw it as her chance to finally accomplish her goal. She shouted for Agent Doryeong, who looked back at her with his dazzling beauty. But just as she was about to confess, the girl was run over by a villain spewing fire from her backside, ruining the day. Another time, Park found herself caught in the middle of a shootout as she tried to express her feelings. But the gunfire was louder than she had anticipated, drowning out the moment that could have been so special between the two lovebirds. In another day, more experienced with these sorts of scenarios, she leaped toward the guy to declare her intentions. But a tornado had suddenly formed, sending her flying in a whirlwind of confusion. Literally caught in the eye of the storm, Rosa screamed her feelings in vain, as always. In the 2 years since Doryeong had saved her, Rosanya Park hadn't shaken her reputation as the unluckiest girl around, always thwarted by random events during these crucial moments in her life. Back in the present, we witness yet another attempt by the villainess. But this time, she's more prepared for any BS that might come her way. She now had a plan B, the letter she had written. Moreover, she had learned that it was crucial to control the correct distance to achieve her goal. and with that in mind, she moved swiftly toward Doryeong to hand him the letter. However, the agent reacted poorly to this sudden movement and attacked with his power, causing Rosa's letter to fall from her hand. Ki Jungi intervened and ordered Doryeong to back off, then put his shape-shifting ability to work. While Rosa lamented her letter being tossed away in the wind, Ki Jungi caught up to the villainess. But as soon as he made contact with her body, both the agent and Rosa were teleported to another location. Meanwhile, the letter fluttered in front of Doryeong, who finally noticed the pink envelope. Elsewhere in the city, which like the entire country, was being battered by the heavy rain, Ki Jungi and Rosa Parks suddenly popped into existence without meaning to. The agent remained unfazed, and with a quick move, he managed to cuff one of the villainess's wrists to his own. That way, he could keep her under control while contacting his teammates. However, the man was caught off guard by the surreal brute strength the villainess possessed when she broke the cuffs without any effort and even handed them back to him, which I found to be quite disrespectful, honestly. But in reality, it was the opposite. In the next panel, we discover that the girl's intention was to return the broken item to its owner, all ashamed and with her head down like a guilty child with her tail between her legs. With that, Rosa hurriedly fled, leaving Ki Jungi standing there empty-handed. Back with Doryeong, he picked up the letter from the ground, assuming it was what Black Mask had wanted to give him, though the motivation behind it remained a mystery to the cop. Curious, he opened the envelope to see its contents, but Ki Jungi appeared just in time to tell the blonde to burn the thing. Completely lost, Doryeong asked how things had gone with Black Mask, and his partner explained that the person was one tough cookie, someone who broke the cuffs and still returned them to the agent, showing that it wasn't worth killing him for nothing. With that said, Ki Jungi instructed the mini-explosion guy to do what he did best to the damn letter. Doryeong protested, feeling he needed to read what was inside, but his partner was convinced it could be a death threat or a trap, so he set the note on fire. At that moment, Doryeong entered a reflective state, mentally pondering everything he was going through. In fact, he considered that it was quite possible it was a death threat, given that any villain would want him dead. At least, that was the usual trend. However, both the first time and this time, Black Mask could have easily finished off Doryeong, but didn't for some reason. And it was this doubt that drove the agent crazy, because it seemed like the villain wanted to say something. Whether he was right or not, the truth was that the letter had already been destroyed, and the chance for communication, for now, had turned to ashes. Written in her best elementary school handwriting, Rosa Parks' letter said that if Doryeong hadn't found and saved her, she would have been dead. After being given a second chance at life, all Rosa wanted was to enjoy it to the fullest, inhaling every questionable substance in excess and mingling with strangers without protection as if there were no tomorrow. At the end of the letter, she mentioned being a fan and signed her name below. Now, what was left of the letter lay on the ground in small, burnt pieces of paper that Doryeong strained to decipher. Meanwhile, Rosa Parks, finally rid of her stifling mask, assumed a smug posture, imagining that at least her message had been left in the right place. Back with the agents, they were all crying around a perplexed Doryeong, their tears blending with the rain in a collective sob fest. Without hesitation, the first thing the young idol did was announce to the president of the Special Agents headquarters that he was resigning from the job. As time passed, the media speculated wildly about the new villain in the spotlight, suggesting that Black Mask had declared war on the agents. While the public trembled in fear over this strange pause, Doryeong had decided to take in the heat of the moment. Watching these alarmist news reports, a man with hoop earrings was doing squats with a pitifully light dumbbell, ruminating over the name Black Mask mentioned on the TV screen. In another apartment, while watching TV and folding clothes from the clothesline, a young lady mentions to her father that the villain on TV is called Black and is from Class S. So the man wants to know who came up with such an absurdly cliché name for the bad guy. In fact, the nickname Black had been announced by the headquarters of the Special Ability Agents for that criminal who possessed super strength and teleportation. The girl's father gets startled and drops the underwear from his hand. Apparently, the villain's ability leaves the man dumbfounded for some reason, making him feel ill for no apparent reason. His wife rushes to his aid, holding him in her arms with monstrous skill, while the daughter simply watches with a dull expression. Yes, the lady had to abandon the frying pan with the eggs still sizzling to help her husband, who suddenly had a fit out of nowhere. In his wife's arms, he claims that Black is not just some masked person. In fact, he assures that this person has returned, whatever that means. At the same time, as the comic indicates, young people felt uneasy during the delicate moment of an elderly woman ranting about the deplorable state of the world. A man next to the woman tries to calm her down by calling her grandma, which sounds odd coming from a man who apparently is her age. Another old man suddenly appears, encouraging destruction, violence, ignorance, vandalism, and hostility. In the middle of the street, a young woman notices the situation from inside a taxi and wonders what the hell is going on here, while handing her credit card to the driver. Refusing the money, the taxi driver tells the passenger to just get out, and she doesn't understand why. In tears, he explains that it's pointless to accept payment if society as a whole is doomed. The passenger, of course, doesn't get a thing, causing her to spiral into confusion inside the vehicle. You probably share this doubt about what's happening to make everyone act this way, so we're going back 52 years to explain the origins of this madness. Back then, one thing that terrified the population was this person mentioned by the man. Even the police had no satisfactory means of dealing with this threat, and this only served as fuel to feed the social chaos caused by this figure. This person had appeared out of nowhere on an ordinary day, and similarly disappeared without a trace, leaving only questions and unpaid bills at Zay's bar. Only those who lived through it can say how much horror was caused by that sinister presence. Nowadays, this person has turned into some sort of internet legend after so much time has passed, but their name and reputation haven't gone unnoticed by the new generation, nor has the threat this person represented. Even the young, theoretically far from the suffering caused by the physical presence of that figure, believed that their return was imminent. The fear of this being was so palpable that people didn't even have the courage to say their name, which clearly reminds us of Voldemort from Harry Potter, because besides the fear of repeating their name, the appearance of the bum was eerily similar to the wizard's. Go figure. On one hand, it's understandable that the population believes in the return of this individual, but the reality couldn't be further from that. In fact, this person is hiding behind an identity few would imagine. Amidst the social panic, a man was traveling by bus, waiting for the stop at station 000. With his stylishly frightening headgear and his shirt with the word love printed on it, he attracted attention for the least noble reasons you might expect, like the smell of rotting liver mixed with armpit sweat. A fellow passenger on the bus, not being a fan of liver, unintentionally expressed his displeasure, but our favorite anti-hero didn't appreciate the unintentional reaction and called out the guy for a chat. First of all, he ordered the guy to sit down. Since the order wasn't followed right away, the big man had to repeat that it was time to sit down. For crying out loud, it wasn't a complicated command to understand. That's right, big guy. Show some authority to this beta loser. After getting what he wanted, the guy raised his hand to deliver a well-placed slap to the passenger's head when he overheard a conversation about a criminal named Black in another part of the bus. One of the smart Alex was talking freely about the criminal, saying his friend should watch more YouTube because his ignorance about the toughest guy of recent times was pretty embarrassing. Aside from the incredible name, which literally means black, the villain is also known as Yudai. If you stop to think about it, in English it would literally mean you die, which is not exactly a great omen, to say the least. At that moment, a sudden skid could be felt by the passengers, and the guy making those sly comments tried to hold on the best way he could. A brilliant way he found was by grabbing onto the big guy's hoodie. Extremely annoyed, the giant made it clear that in civilized society, we should hold on to something else in the bus, not the genitals or headgear of other passengers. At that point, the crowd realized they were standing before Yudai and let out an ear-piercing scream. Without shame, they begged for help, promising to behave like angels from now on and not spout nonsense randomly. Yudai, on the other hand, asked what's the point of cooking people for no reason. After this brilliant reflection, he told the driver he was getting off. And so, as he exited the bus, it became clear that this individual who terrified society 52 years ago was named Yudai. On the other hand, setting aside the nicknames from his violent past, his real name is Diana, a lovely name. His ability? Being a superhuman with extreme style. Hearing that wretched name, Black, the buff old man clenched his bag of vegetables tighter than usual. As far as he remembers, a TV report aired just yesterday about this bum taking over all the headlines. That's when we learn about the worst villain hiding in the crowd. Among his thoughts, he wondered who gave Black that name. But villains don't just live off evil deeds. We all have our personal lives, and Yudai was no different. When he got home and took off his sneakers, he announced that Grandma was in the house. And by the way, Grandma is him, in case you're still unsure of that. His granddaughter greeted him with all the love in the world, showering her grandma with affection. Diana, in turn, couldn't have loved her granddaughter more, to the point that he would never allow any living or dead soul from this dimension or others to lay a finger on his precious little grandchild. At 79 years old, Diana had an enviable physique and the stamina to take care of household chores without issue. A legendary criminal, an icon, a star, Diana was the paternal grandmother of Park Rosa. Yes, the young lady who appeared out of nowhere was Rosa, and you didn't even notice. While doing the dishes, Diana tells her granddaughter that something bad happened out there, which is why she's concerned when the girl is putting on her shoes to head out. Rosa explains she's going to school, but this grandma is no different from all the others. Before leaving, you have to eat, period, no excuses. However, Rosa ends up complaining about this impulse, which was the worst decision of the girl's life. Diana begins to lose her temper in an irreparable way, and uses the opportunity to criticize her granddaughter's lack of organization, as the girl's room looked worse than a war zone. But that part wasn't even close to the worst of it. Snooping through her granddaughter's mess, Diana ends up finding a mask we already know belongs to a certain someone. Gradually, the muscular granny pieces together on her own that this accessory is the same one Black uses. Now, to drop the suspense, the truth is that the grandmother didn't even get mad about it. On the contrary, she was happy that her granddaughter was growing up so fast and following the path of a crafty supervillain who causes chaos wherever she goes. However, not everything is about joy, and not everything is about joy for Diana. Another feeling overtook her mind in that fateful moment, a need to go after her granddaughter. Meanwhile, at the Special Abilities headquarters, President Choi Gilbey was tenderly stroking an incredibly beautiful chick. Beyond that, the president was asking the bird how it could be so beautiful, such was his admiration for the animal. In other words, the guy had no idea that things were about to heat up. Simultaneously, wandering through his school, Doryeong was trying to avoid drawing attention, but it was simply impossible with the shabby cap he had chosen for the task. In the school's hallways, he was widely recognized by students and staff who had no idea this famous figure would show up, as the boy almost never did. In a conversation with his boss a few days ago about what to do during vacation, Choi had recommended that he return to school as a way to stay committed to his college life until graduation, especially since the boy's grades were fantastic. Now, poor Doryeong had to bear the consequences of that decision, as wherever he went, mosquitoes and flies swarmed around with an unbelievable energy to spread the news that the special agent was in the building. Not only was he at school, but as we scroll down this massive comic panel, a female figure stands out at the end of the scene, and this is no coincidence. After all, this was Rosa Parks, the driving force behind this story, who gained strength with every unfolding event. Back at the headquarters of the special agents, where the president was more worried about the bird's looks than anything serious, the poor man suffers a psychological blow when the animal escaped from his hand without a care in the world. But that wasn't all. The bird fled with determination, as we can see from the panel. It's undeniable. What pisses me off is when people act like Dr. Dolittle, thinking they can communicate with animals and form deep connections with them, when in reality, the creature just wants to kill its owner without remorse. Confused by the bird's escape, Choi wasn't just lamenting the loss. In another sense, let's say Diana had appeared before his eyes, expressing how much she missed the president after such a long time apart. Despite the tension in the air, Choi didn't back down, responding that this meeting was as fun as painting with Luxcolor, a joke the old lady thankfully didn't understand. According to her, corruption still exists and is rampant in a capitalist society as unequal as this one. Whether Choi is a communist or not is something we won't know, because his only response to this bombshell is that Diana is still as huge as ever, an irrefutable fact just like what she had stated. Nevertheless, Diana insists that his words are insignificant, which is why she allows herself to be more direct with the officer. Without beating around the bush, she says, "I'm not going to pretend to be black." Choi questions what the hell she means by that. So Diana keeps her blunt honesty at expert level and reveals without hesitation that Black is her granddaughter. The revelation was so bombastic that Rosa Parks herself felt the pressure from far away, causing her to drop her sewage sandwich, which had been lovingly prepared by the least aesthetically minded cook in all of Korea. After the break, Rosa is still reasonably perplexed, but the truth is that there is a much more concrete reason behind her mental confusion. According to the buzz around school, the famous Han Doryeong was strutting through the hallways with all his beauty and charm, and Razanya couldn't help but join in the social commotion caused by this fact. The girls said they loved the guy, and the guys said they loved the guy too, but in a totally straight way, mind you. At no point did they think about stripping the hero down and turning him into a super-powered inflatable doll. No, these very straight guys would never think of doing something so not straight like that. Amidst this chaos, all the special agent wanted was to quietly make his way through the school. Even though he knew he was as popular as Cristiano Ronaldo, considering that not even SARS-7 has the ability to fly and levitate people with his supernatural strength. Either way, all Doryeong wanted was to get out of there as quickly as possible. But people kept approaching him, reminding him that he had saved them from some random scooter accident or a crash landing of a Brazilian Boeing in downtown Sao Paulo. In the middle of this mess, the super agent ended up being shoved and lightly touched someone's hand. Doryeong looked up to see who the lucky person was, and the spotlight fell on a guy who thought Doryeong had held his hand in a gesture of love, or worse, in an act of harassment. Confused by the man's bizarre reaction, Doryeong tried to explain that it was an accident. But no matter how much the hero tried to lead a normal life where people resolve conflicts with a brief conversation, the situation was far more complicated. A crowd was swarming around the poor guy, making his vacation a living hell, as everyone wanted a piece of the most heroic hero in Korea. Meanwhile, Rosa Parks remained calm in the chaos. Well, not entirely. She did want to rub the guy's belly, but after reconsidering her thoughts, she figured it might be better to stay quiet rather than adding to the problem. At the same time, she wondered if it would be a good idea to clear a path through the crowd, granting her and her favorite hero a glorious, uninterrupted meeting. Suddenly, amidst all these reflections, Rosa realized that Doryeong had looked directly at her, and this certainty sparked an aura around her capable of causing intense cracks in the surrounding glass. This was the power of love in its most primal form, along with a shard of glass that threatened to invade the hallway with its unstoppable energy. Realizing the situation, our hero darted towards Rosa, leaving all the onlookers behind. As the glass exploded wildly around Rosa Parks, the young man was already quick enough to save the day once again, which is something he was born to do, definitely. The shard of glass headed straight for the woman's face, but shattered completely on the ground. However, we discover at this moment that the incident wasn't caused by Rosa Parks. There was an external force influencing the event. After holding Rosanya in a tender embrace, Doryeong realized the situation had spiraled out of control and pulled out his Thundercats watch. He yelled his name into the device, alerting it that there was an emergency and that it was time to use his abilities. As he saved the people from the debris caused by the strange impact, Doryeong asked the girl with glasses if she could stand. In that moment, Rosa thought she was on a Tinder date and replied that she could, while brushing her hair behind her ear and trying to explain that she desperately desired the hero's naked body. However, before she could confess, Doryeong gently evacuated the young woman to the stairs, proving that a job well done requires drastic measures. With that done, he ordered everyone to get out of the building and retrieve the monstrous shard of glass that had started all this mess. Apparently, it wasn't a chemical weapon or some extremely complex device designed by a surreal evil genius, nor was it some carefully crafted contraption developed by a thinking being. Perhaps it was an item used by a donkey, a fool, an imbecile who didn't have the cognitive ability to develop anything even remotely complicated. In fact, it seemed this case was simply a result of good old brute force. That's when Diana appeared, demanding that the phrase brute force be kept in the deepest pits of hell by that metrosexual hero. Without a doubt, Diana guaranteed that her next attack wouldn't just be with her fingers, leaving us to wonder what limbs might be used in such an approach. Choi showed up as if he didn't care and announced that the solution to this mess was to arrest the granddaughter of this villain. Diana, in turn, responded with a question that would make our souls tremble with fear in a way that couldn't be measured by mere mortals. In other words, we'd all be scared out of our wits just hearing the grandma ask, "What did you just say?" The thing is, Choi wasn't fazed by such a threat because he knew he was tough too. So much so that he went on to say they should arrest Diana as well, as a bonus. Faced with this, Diana smiled and commented that the president was too old for such childish threats, which thoroughly confused Choi, as he was the type of 50-year-old who tried to learn the kids' slang to feel young again, despite being a lonely old man who depended on chicks for happiness. When I talk about chicks, I mean the animal, to be clear. Artur, put a picture of the chick on the screen, please. Anyway, Diana extended her massive hand and assured him that everything was fine. Penetrating the wall with her fingers as if it were nothing, she demolished the entire plaster and impressed Choi's chick, which stood erect in response to the situation. Choi asked for a more civil conversation, considering things were getting way too heated, But the truth is, Diana wanted to play hardball with the special agent's president if he didn't shut up. She wasn't in the mood for games today, clearly. Choi warned that civilians would turn into mush if the giant woman threw an entire wall on top of them, to which Diana reminded him that it was his responsibility to stop her. She had nothing to do with it. She wasn't causing any suffering. It was all in her head for sure. Diana wondered if the old man wasn't going to run off and save the rest of his life, so he could keep flirting with fake women in self-help Facebook groups. Meanwhile, the windows of the building shattered and danced furiously under the pressure. Doryeong asked a woman to get out before things got even worse, but she really wanted an autograph before leaving. The handsome man apologized, but had to be honest about the gravity of the situation. As Tinky Winky, Dipsy, Lala, and Po would say, it's time to say goodbye, not sign autographs for clueless citizens who get themselves into danger, and then expect heroes to bail them out when they could have easily avoided the problem. So, after shooing the woman away, Doryeong looked at us with an absolutely seductive expression, and few of us could resist such overwhelming and captivating charm from this special man. So beautiful, so strong, so charming, so talented, so everything and a bit more. This is Han Doryeong, the most handsome and badass guy in the whole story. Getting back on track, the hero reflected that the shard of glass couldn't withstand even a slight touch when he held it and had completely shattered. For that reason, he concluded that Black possessed extremely extreme strength, and that only a being with extremely strong strength could cause such an extreme problem. But it didn't end there. It seemed Black knew where Doryeong was, probably because he was publicly exposed in a school that was in no way a hiding place. Honestly, it wasn't hard to figure out. I'm not trying to be smart, I swear. It just seems really obvious to me. The guy should have been vacationing in the Bahamas or in Rocinha, not in a school in Korea. But the worst part is that he felt like he shouldn't have taken this time off, poor guy. He works all year, and when it's time to kick back, he feels guilty for not chasing down criminals. And considering he's the one doing everything in this mess, it seems unfair. Crazy, right? However, the damage was done, and Doryeong was once again put to the test without his consent. From there, all he could do was let it go and take the necessary actions. The thing is, not everything goes as planned, and one proof of that is that an entire building was thrown on top of the vacationing hero without warning. He watched the gigantic structure fall like a rotten banana and realized it was the special agent's headquarters, and he wouldn't be able to dodge something that big. At the same time, he reflected that there were people inside who would be flattened like pancakes from the devastating impact. So Doryeong tried to hold the thing with his power. Even if he couldn't prevent dozens of people from dying in the building, at least he could heal one or two with his healing power, and that seemed like enough. With no other option, Han Doryeong extended his hand and took charge of damage control with his special ability, but a doubt gnawed at his frazzled mind. When the hero is in danger, who will be willing to save him? Will it be Chapel in Colorado? Kratos? Captain Marvel and her friends whose names I forgot because I fell asleep in the theater? Jesus Christ? Or the best option of all, Vladimir Putin riding a bear? Yes, he would love for it to be Vladimir Putin riding a bear, but the reality played a trick on him, as the structure couldn't be held by his individual power. One of the victims who had been in the building corrected their stance to join the fight, adjusting their posture to prevent death from becoming everyone's fate. Rosa Parks, with her scarlet eyes, took the lead and unleashed a powerful punch on the building, hurling it back from where it came, right into the street where some good folks were driving by. Doryeong watched the scene with a look of disbelief, while Rosa asked if the guy was okay, reversing the situation where it had been him asking her the same question. Well, the score was now even. What was also even was Doryeong's sense of déjà vu after experiencing this traumatic event. The incident threw him back to a memory where Yudai asked if the baby was hurt or injured, just like Rosa was now asking him. But if you want to understand what the hell is going on, please don't rush. Relax and order a cheap snack from Uber Eats, because what we're about to discover will make the hairs on our buttocks stand up like a porcupine under attack from a crocodile. Going back to a particularly returnable return, still in Chapter 1, we must ask ourselves which of us has never experienced a scene similar to this. In a casual family setting, a guy calls out to his mom like he's casually bringing up a small thing, but he hates to sound like Goku from the deep web saying this. He would love for his diaper to be changed. After all, it's been 3 weeks since this little monstrosity, uglier than sin, has accumulated such an obscene amount of poop in his diaper that one whiff of the inside of his rectum could be classified as the practical demonstration of a chemical weapon. His mother grabs the poorly formed demon child and laughs at his inability to express himself clearly. Now, the story has ended. Can you tell me what the moral was? I'll give you 5 seconds to reflect on the answer. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The moral of the story is to eat cement, as taught to us by the eternal Edi Bailu. Just kidding. The point is that dealing with special abilities requires time and training, as we can read in this comic. In Rosa's case, she was extraordinarily clumsy with her special abilities, to the point of being considered a danger to society, as her powers were still at a toddler's level. For this reason, when she faced the secret agents that fateful night, when Sei noted that the villain's aesthetic resembled a low-budget film from the interior of Goya's, Rosa advanced on the loudmouth and grabbed her arm in a way that could easily hurl her miles away, potentially causing irreparable injury to the woman. However, Rosa was not without empathy, which is why she regretted putting the agent's physical integrity at risk. Please abandon your mindless judgment and consider the real truth about Rosa Parks. The poor thing didn't know what she was doing. She just wanted to get closer to Doryeong and thought it was a good idea to assault one of his colleagues to achieve her goal. Unfortunately, Doryeong didn't react well to this gratuitous hostility and warned the villain that she was in deep trouble with him. But Rosa didn't even respond to the provocation. She was too nervous in front of that masculine voice booming into her eardrums to even understand what he was saying. In her mind, all that was running through Rosa's head was how much more handsome the hero in front of her was than the last time she saw him, especially with that blonde hair that suited him so well. At the same time, her conscience forced her to reconsider these impulsive thoughts about the hunk's appearance, and Rosa thanked God her mind couldn't speak out loud, otherwise she would have been arrested on the spot. Not for attacking Sei, but for mentally harassing another citizen. Anyway, when Doryeong touched Park's shoulder that day, she snapped back to reality. Outwardly, her gas mask hid the real expression she wore when feeling that delicious hand on her body. Inwardly, all she wanted was to bask in that angelic presence on Earth, as if he were the ultimate savior of humanity. From that moment on, Rosa imagined in her innocent little head that something was terribly right about all this, but the undeniable reality is only one. Doryeong wanted to mess up Park's face with punches. With that said, the comic indicates that the problem lies elsewhere, so don't go anywhere for heaven's sake. In that confusing chaos where people were running back and forth in a disoriented rush, Rosa Parks regretted that she had been in front of Han Doryeong and couldn't express the love and admiration she felt for that man. And this gnawed at her conscience with unimaginable intensity, especially considering it was the second time she had been saved by the hunk. Amid the commotion, 2 students were hypothesizing that all the noise was due to exam season, while their colleague claimed she had crammed everything she could into her brain. While those certified nerds were boasting about their above-average intelligence, Rosa could only think about the guy and wasn't ashamed of it. She knelt on the ground for not even being able to say thank you. Suddenly, students were pointing at a place, believing a missile was flying towards them, and everyone ran wildly through the corridors in search of safety. Those who were too lazy to run waited for Doryeong to show up, though they didn't know where the hero was. That's when Rosa sprang into action, skidding across the floor to find the perfect position for the rescue. Without the slightest embarrassment, the heroine prepared to turn the situation upside down with the famous punch that had already sent the building back to where it came from, only to ask if Doryeong was chill in the middle of the herd. Cool as a cucumber, calm like a cricket. Impressed, Doryeong analyzed his savior's face and prepared to ask how this chick was able to pull off something like that. But the crowd rushed back in to give all the credit to Doryeong as usual, shouting from the rooftops that the hunk had saved the day once again. In the midst of it all, he grabbed Rosa's hand and pulled her aside. On a bench inside the school, he confessed he didn't know there was someone so badass in the school and felt betrayed for only finding out now. On the other hand, Rosa focused her entire brain on the fact that she was chit-chatting with the most handsome and well-endowed guy around, ignoring whatever he was saying. Doryeong asked if Rosa had ever thought about becoming a special agent, but she didn't think she had the right qualities. Using his charm, Doryeong remarked that it would be a shame if Rosa didn't take advantage of her talent. Dying of embarrassment, Miss Rosa was left speechless, so Doryeong commented that the person responsible for the school attack was black, even though yesterday's disaster hadn't been well publicized and few people knew about the villain. To illustrate his point, Doryeong leaned closer to the girl than usual and showed her what he meant. There stood Black, with his gas mask and Sith robe on a tight budget. "It's me," thought Rosa Parks. "Yes, it's you indeed, who would have thought?" Playing dumb, she asked if this was some kind of bad guy, and the agent explained that he was a new special criminal who had left him a letter with the name Rosa Parks. clearly indicating that she was someone Doryeong had saved a while back and would have died if it hadn't been for his heroic intervention. For that reason, this person declared herself a fan of the hunk. Knowing that Doryeong had read the letter was enough to leave Rosa dumbstruck, but he mistakenly declared that Rosa Park wanted to kill him, adding that the same person had told him to enjoy his brief time left on this plane. Doryeong confessed that he had never admitted anything like this before, but the truth was, he was shitting his pants. After all, what would happen if he didn't win this battle? What if he died? People would inevitably suffer, which left the hero unsure of what to do. Rosa bit her tongue, not revealing the truth to the guy, that she was black and that all this mess was because she would love to see the hunk's radish exposed in her home with no extra visitors. Rosa would prefer to be open about this and be hated by Doryeong than keep lying, but another part of her just couldn't bear the thought of being loathed by this fine piece of man. In the middle of this reflection, Doryeong noticed that Rosa had hurt her face while trying to save him, which he made sure to clarify by nearly devouring the woman without any pertinent reason. For that reason, he apologized and said it was his fault. Although Rosa disagreed, she remained unusually quiet, with a face that looked like she was holding in gas, prompting Doryeong to ask what was going through her mind. After all, it wasn't just her insane expression, but also the fact that her nose was bleeding. Nonetheless, no challenge could break her spirit. Just as Rosa was fine after being hit by a car, a little shard of glass wasn't going to make her cry. By the way, one person occupying Rosa's thoughts was Diana, whom Rosa was certain had caused this incident. That wicked granny. Doryeong handed the girl a cloth to clean her face and asked how she had managed to arrive at the right spot so quickly for the rescue. But before Rosanya could respond, the hero speculated that she might have used some ability like teleportation, which sent Park into a mental spiral. Going further, Doryeong noted that Black also had that ability, prompting Rosa to interrupt before the guy could go into too much detail about that comparison. She claimed she was really fast, so fast, in fact, that her technique was lovingly named Super Rosax because of how quick and pink she was, super and all. Like Sonic, you know? It's like Sonic, seriously. The thing is pure speed, tons of joined-up velocity. Too fast, dude, you see. However, Doryeong now wanted to know how Rosa had managed to punch an entire building, but when he acknowledged that hitting a specific point might make the job easier, the girl breathed a sigh of relief at the guy's cluelessness. Setting that aside, he admitted that it had been a long time since he had such an informal and honest conversation with another human being, because when he got home, all he did was kill time on X videos and enjoy Hiroshi Manhwa's genius videos on YouTube. Rosa asked if the guy didn't have a friend or fan to vent his troubles to, and he admitted that it wasn't cool to do that kind of thing with fans, because if he showed any fear, the people who trusted in his abilities would start to get anxious. However, he didn't see Rosa as a fan, or at least didn't see her that way. Man, the guy missed the mark. He remarked that talking with this girl felt comfortable and pleasant at the same time, like the sensation of lying down on a 5-square-meter pillow. Given such sweet talk, Rosa Park decided to keep it a secret that she was the worst fan of all. Struggling, stumbling, but not falling, Rosa asserted that next time something really crazy would happen. But unfortunately, she was interrupted by a phone call. She informed him it was her grandma and walked away. So Doryeong figured he had taken up too much of her time, but she tried to explain she would rather stay with him 1,000 times over, especially if he was naked. That would be fantastic. The problem was that this call had completely killed the vibe of the conversation. So the guy ended up saying goodbye, which the girl did in return, albeit reluctantly. Finally, with all his charm and sympathy, Doryeong sent Rosa off with a see you later, lifting her into another dimension, where lightning and thunder formed the backdrop of characters with mouths bigger than their heads to illustrate the size of their perplexity at such emotionally moving events in their routine. Just like Rosa's astonishment at hearing that Angel's voice being so gentle and polite with her. A brutish woman forgotten by God. But she wasn't alone in this world. In the background, her grandmother was trying every way possible to get her attention. When the girl screamed wildly in surprise, the old lady was sure her granddaughter had truly lost touch with reality. Rosa proved Diana's point by repeating the word Kia several times, while Diana kept insisting her granddaughter listen to what she had to say. Meanwhile, Han Doryeong was hiding under his blanket because of the bizarre terror he felt toward that buff grandma. As he had admitted to a stranger, he was as nervous as a tightly screwed bolt. But thinking now with his empty little head, it had been a huge mistake to make such a revelation to some random person, and this realization about his slip-up caused the guy to joke her out irreversibly, so much so that the dude felt like he was losing it. Let's be honest, no matter how comfortable he felt, blurting out something that huge to someone he didn't know wasn't a smart move, and no one knew that better than the hero himself. Distraught, Han couldn't understand how he had made such a blunder out of nowhere, which is why he remained under his blanket, as if the cozy warmth of the blanket were his mother's womb, where he wished to return so he wouldn't have to deal with the federal disaster he had brought upon himself. With tears in his eyes, he poked his head out from the blanket and realized it had been a long time since he had felt so deeply connected to someone, and that was worthy of thanks to the dear Rosa Park, the woman who had provided this glorious emotion to Han Doryeong. One way or another, this day had turned out to be special for him in a way he never could have imagined. On the other hand, we can be sure the feeling was mutual for Rosanya, who was hugging the poster of her favorite hero with the certainty that he had poured out a deep emotion into her ear for free, without asking for anything in return. Just the heat of the moment, letting his emotions flow in a beautifully spontaneous way. And she had been there to hear things Doryeong had never told anyone else. After all, it wasn't just any event that had happened before this remarkable dialogue. Han Doryeong, the greatest hero in the country, was almost killed in front of society, and Rosanya was there to prevent people from crying in the shower over the fact that the blonde guy had turned into mush. This event should have led to a lighthearted and emotional conversation after the guy nearly kicked the bucket, but the truth is that public figures like Doryeong, who are special agents, can't afford to have normal experiences in society. Revealing a weakness to a civilian could mean that, within some time, this news might spread and reach the wrong ears, giving an enemy the opportunity to use this flaw against a law agent. For that reason, in desperation, Doryeong couldn't contain his desperate despair. But calming himself down for a brief moment, he recalled the kind Rosa Parks and thought he should thank her properly. However, this thought wasn't the only thing consuming our hero's soul at that moment. Suddenly, remembering his responsibilities, he recalled that he had used his special ability without permission. But even so, he hadn't been called in by the boss to be reprimanded. In other words, something might have happened to Mr. Choi Gilbey. Speaking of the poor guy, Choi and his little friend were having serious difficulties staying upright amidst the struggles. The impetuous Diana, with her unmatched strength, had subdued the president of the special agent's headquarters. The man's phone rang on his desk, but the old man avoided answering it, thinking it was a payment reminder from his phone company, as he hadn't paid his postpaid bill yet again. Suddenly, the little bird chirped and perched on the guy's shoulder to remind him about that damned medication. That's right, the bird spoke. This is really happening. Not only did it speak, but upon realizing his master's ridiculous behavior, the bird screamed in his ear about the medication. Snapping back to reality, Choi checked his phone and realized it was the alarm reminding him it was time to take his blood pressure pills. After doing so, the old man thanked his little bird, Kapipi, for the great help. An employee asked if the boss had a good night's sleep with his broken ribs and urged him to come down while they sorted out the mess, but Choi didn't want to inconvenience anyone by using another workshop. Besides, with the collapse that had occurred, he finally had the balcony in his office that he'd always wanted. However, the exemplary employee Sangbok explained that the boss's presence might hinder the cleanup efforts. Even though he was the head of the damage restoration team and had the ability to restore any material thing to its original state, the guy wasn't a miracle worker and needed some organization to get things done. By the way, speaking of the attack on the headquarters, Sangbok asked why the boss hadn't arrested Black when he had been so close to the criminal. Thinking about it, Choi remembered that a while back his watch had gone off to signal that Doryeong was using his powers, but his more urgent concern had been Diana, who bluntly demanded all the president's attention by declaring herself to be the true Black. Choi recalled that, despite being in the middle of a fight, her face, as she uttered those words, though it resembled the same look Gabriel Jesus had while playing football, was stunningly beautiful. With that memory in mind, the old man lamented not being able to kill Black, and we finally learned that Choi Gilbey's secret ability was actually taking lives. That said, we can assume that the old man failed miserably. In case you didn't notice, while lost in his thoughts, the old man was frantically rubbing a little plant. However, upon remembering that he needed gloves to do this properly, the elderly man groaned in frustration, realizing that he had ruined the poor plant by handling it inappropriately. Choi asked Sangbok to take care of the situation, but as he had said before, he could restore things, but he wasn't Jesus Christ. In other words, what has lost its life is gone forever, off to a better place without any chance of returning. Incidentally, the employee asked how many people had died at the boss's hands, teaching that the cycle of life is cruel and relentless. Despite everything, the experienced officer was fully aware of this. But it didn't stop him from grieving for his beloved plant, to the point where Choi made sure to highlight this fact to Papipiu, who, though somewhat empathetic toward the old man, gave him a deeply suspicious look. Anyway, Ms. Kim, who is part of the restoration team and possesses the cement woman ability, asked if Choi had called for Doryeong yet. The boss then remembered he needed to act immediately, so he put on his gloves and entered a vegetative state of meditation. After all, Choi knew Doryeong very well and assumed that the poor guy must be in trouble by now for using his power, especially since the boy always insisted on carrying the entire country on his back, which could eventually result in a seriously herniated disc. Kim interrupted his meditation, telling him to hurry up and call the poor boy already, prompting Choi to realize he had spaced out and needed to return to his duties right away. Without delay, South Korean newspapers splashed their TV headlines with Han Doryeong's name as the country's savior once again, alongside a basic motivational message to encourage overworking among the viewing public. According to one report, Doryeong had said that the key to his success in this extraordinary mission was working hard, even while on vacation. On social media, the man was praised, as always, for his exemplary efficiency and patriotic dedication to the citizens of his nation. It was a common consensus among civilians that special agents like Han Doryeong were absolutely essential for everyone's safety. The general mentality was that this man was an indispensable figure for Korean society. Not only was the agent dominant and left no room for anyone to contest his work, but the admiration he received bolstered Doryeong's overwhelming popularity in the media, where he was always the most talked-about subject among the population. In one of these endless posts about the country's hero, Sei was rolling her eyes in disbelief. This young lady, as we know, is a typical heroine, gorgeous and extremely talented. If she were a hotel, she'd undoubtedly be 5 stars. If she were a car, she'd be a Ferrari. If she were a video game, she'd be Red Dead Redemption 2. If she were a politician, she'd be the right-wing Joker. But that's not all. Besides being ridiculously skilled, Sei was Doryeong's work partner. What many didn't know was that she hated the guy's guts. No wonder she clicked the middle finger button on the post about him, saving the day once again. Moments after this fit, Doryeong himself asked her what had gotten into her. It seemed like this time, the clown wasn't him. Sei commented that she had seen a video of him with 40 million views, and it wasn't even on his own channel. Anyway, she would love to know who was filming him so closely during the action, but Doryeong was determined to keep Rosa Parks a secret. Sei kept pressing for an answer, but the man maintained his statue-like stance, waiting for the storm to pass, with sweat pouring off his face uncontrollably. Fortunately for him, the girl received a call on her watch and bid the jerk goodbye, leaving him relieved and resuming his journey while whistling the melody to Lady Gaga's Bad Romance. Reflecting on the situation, Doryeong pondered that this incident had been a turning point. Suddenly, he came to the conclusion that Korea wouldn't be in danger if he were to die, as there was someone capable of replacing him as Korea's ultimate hero. This realization made the man feel at peace. However, he was still overcome with the urge to get in touch with Rosa Parks and ask her a burning question the next time they met. Once again, Han Doryeong was willing to fight with his life on the line. He just didn't know against whom. As night fell, speaking of conflicts, Baek was being chased by a police helicopter, and the officers were demanding that the criminal drop her weapons, if she had any, but it wasn't necessary if she didn't. Considering Doryeong's concerns, it's clear that he'll end up fighting Park Rosa. Days before this revealing revelation, we are abruptly thrown into a boring classroom where the students' speech bubbles convey exhaustion, impatience, and a slight desire to die. Among all those bums who were called students, one stood out from the crowd. Tired of it all, young Kim Bu-sik was only 18 years old, but his hatred for humanity and the world as a whole made him look like a 36-year-old bricklayer's assistant who smokes derby without using his hands because they're always busy carrying wheelbarrows full of cement. A classmate leaned in close to the tormented young man and had the audacity to comment that he smelled worse than a fart after a 4th slice of Mexican pizza. This unpleasant remark made Bu-sik coldly wish he had a special ability to destroy everything in his path. That's when his rage awakened something he had never imagined in his sad, pathetic life. The mechanical pencil he was holding turned to ashes, as did his perception of life and society. But that wasn't all. Ironically, a fart released by the man triggered the awakening of his powers. And just as the flatulence might suggest, this special ability would become known as corrosion. Considering that this embarrassing moment had occurred a month earlier, since then, Kim Bu-sik had dropped out of school to pursue the path of evil. He decided that today would be the perfect day for his debut as a villain. Always followed by the foul smell of his farts, he thought it would be a great idea to destroy a streetlight and mess up the neighborhood's power supply. This idea revealed that, besides being smelly, the guy was a genius. But he didn't want to stop there. Alongside this act of sabotage and vandalism, his next step would be to rob a convenience store, the most brilliant criminal mastermind in the world. A man tried to reprimand the young thug's bad vibes, threatening to call the special police, but Bu-sik was defiant and didn't care. In fact, he wanted them to call the police. He even threw the streetlight at the poor guy who had threatened him, making it clear that today was the day he'd throw in the towel and fully embrace the world of depravity. So far, everything had been going perfectly for the villain, except for one small detail. Without warning, someone prevented the innocent man from dying by catching the falling streetlight. It was Black herself, holding her sugar-free lemon drink with 7% real lemon juice. That's right. After her unexpected conversation with Doryeong, Rosa had been so profoundly impacted that her mind became the purest definition of shocked. That incident had complicated her relationship with the world and with Doryeong himself, as she concluded that the poor guy had been going through tough times because of her. So, she decided to switch sides and start saving people as Black, thereby showing that this so-called villain wasn't truly a threat. For this reason, we can deduce that Bu-sik was out of luck once again, because today wasn't his day, as he had thought. It was Black's who would make her debut as a hero. Black asked if the man she had saved was okay, to which he confirmed. But as for the villain, the heroine showed far less patience, promising to deliver the hammer of justice with her own fists. Or rather, with the fallen streetlight, as she wielded it like a sword, terrifying the old man once again. While Rosanya apologized to the man, Bu-sik took advantage of her distraction to flee as quickly as he could. However, Black wasn't one to give up easily, stopping the thug's escape by nearly hitting him with the construction element. The only problem was that throwing the streetlight had caused an overload that knocked out the entire neighborhood's electricity. In the middle of the confusion, Bu-sik managed to escape, or at least, that's what he thought. Black was still exerting her imposing presence over the scoundrel with her surreal speed, not to mention her ability to teleport. Raising her right fist, Rosa declared that this would be the end for the villain and slammed the fallen streetlight onto his head, sending the poor guy into a blue screen of death instantly. However, despite her good intentions, Black was misinterpreted by a passerby who had witnessed the worst possible part of the scene and jumped to conclusions about the complexity of the situation. In other words, both he and other bystanders accused Black of killing an innocent person, while she tried in vain to convince them that the guy was perfectly fine, just taking a nap after all that running. Regardless, she accused Bu-sik of being the delinquent in this story. Be that as it may, it was clear the civilians didn't believe this masked figure, as her image was that of a ruthless criminal. Without delay, the special police were called to handle the situation. We then returned to the moment when the helicopter spotted the supposed suspect. The officers ordered the criminal not to move unless they wanted a bullet to the face. Black tried to explain that the real criminal wasn't her, but the thug had simply vanished by this point, leaving Rosa with no one to blame in this sinister affair. Away from the scene, Bu-sik was panting like an old man after running for his life, and realizing that doing some cardio once in a while might be a good idea to avoid such predicaments. Furious at the humiliation Black had caused him, he vowed to destroy her. But it didn't stop there. Humiliated for not having received attention on the day, he wanted to put on his own little show. The villain decided to turn back and settle the score. However, Doryeong appeared on the scene after having heard Bu-sik's entire expository monologue, which meant he now knew everything that had happened, basically. Curiously, instead of panicking in the face of the toughest hero around, Bu-sik felt like a true villain for finally attracting such an important agent. Well, let's just say that this misguided thrill continued as the boy was promptly locked up. After sending the kid to jail, Doryeong wanted to know why Black had been chasing a villain, admitting that he had a lot of questions for her. To prevent her escape, the hero grabbed Rosa by the arm, ensuring that his questions would be answered. Around them, Doryeong's colleagues noticed that he had captured the villain. But reality was about to reveal itself as something else. Unable to reveal her true identity no matter what, the supposed criminal grabbed the agent and teleported with him. Upon realizing that the two had disappeared, Sei thought she was losing her mind. At their new destination, Doryeong warned that teleporting him wouldn't work because his watch had a tracking device. Upon hearing this, Rosa ripped the genius's accessory off and tossed it far away. Faced with the facts, the man wondered if Black's ultimate goal, after all this drama, was to kill him. However, the bandit shook her head no. The girl tried to communicate as best she could without using her voice, fearing that he might recognize her if she did. So, she grabbed her phone and, using an app called Pepigo, Rosa tried to tell the guy that she wasn't a bad person. Confronted with this bombshell, and without questioning the veracity of this information for a second, Doryeong acted in an oddly empathetic manner, on a level beyond normal, by gently touching the girl's face. Or rather, her gas mask, leaving Rosanya Park speechless. To make matters worse, two fresh-faced special police officers showed up and witnessed the absurdity of the situation. But from what it seemed, they hadn't seen exactly what was going on and immediately pointed the finger at poor Black without thinking twice. According to the young woman who had just arrived, the duo had searched for them all over the city, which I find very hard to believe unless this girl's ability was omnipresence. Let's be rational here. Anyway, regardless of everything, I'm starting to think I know who this reckless pair is. Apparently, these are the twins who hadn't appeared in the series yet. And indeed, they were, as we discover as the comic comes to its distant conclusion. Black thinks the two are far too young to be part of a police force, which makes sense. But the truth is, nothing makes sense in this story, so she'll have to adapt to the madness just like we've all been doing around here. With that, her first reaction was to hightail it out of there without a second thought, prompting the twin sister to chase after her, leaving trails of fire in her wake while her brother extinguished it all with water. Tired of playing this game, young Kong Mungryong, age 16, saw no alternative but to keep running after her. Bolting through the crowd, Black was pulling all the stops to avoid being caught, with Kong Chunhyang hot on her tail. Taking a quick glance at the girl, Rosanya noted that her face was actually quite pretty. But today wasn't the day to acknowledge her pursuer's beauty. The problem was that the girl was so rattled by the twins' presence that she forgot she could simply teleport out of there. As a result, she endured the flames caused by the teenage girl without mercy, while her brother doused all the chaos. What a dynamic duo, right? Yep, these are the Kong siblings, Chunhyang and Mungryong. From birth, these two had been closer than ever, almost like conjoined twins but separated. One parent speculated that this might have happened because Chunhyang and Mungryong were names of a couple, and this caused the newborns to immediately pull apart. Having grown up alarmingly fast while still in kindergarten, the girl manifested her fire powers, and the boy discovered his water abilities, both at the same time. Unfortunately, neither could control their abilities during elementary school. One day, during a regular class, the teacher asked the students to open their notebooks to page 21. At that moment, a poor girl witnessed an unusual scene in the classroom where Mungryong appeared to have completely wet himself. She screamed for the teacher in such a way that the whole class turned to see the grotesque sight. Without mincing words, the snitch accused the poor boy of peeing his pants, and the whole class turned into a circus where Mungryong was definitely the clown. Faced with the situation, believe it or not, the boy, who had become the victim of such uncalled-for bullying, kept his cool. Quite the opposite. He accepted that he had peed his pants, and that's that. Deal with it. At another point, seeing the poor kid isolated from his classmates, a group of boys invited Mungryong to play with water guns, and this unexpected invitation made the young loner's eyes light up with joy. But the excitement that came with it accidentally triggered another uncontrolled release of his water powers, drenching the poor boys. Oblivious to the disaster he was causing, the boy danced and ran around the gym like a chicken in mud. Because of his lack of understanding of this power and how to control it, Kong Mungryong became extremely isolated. As for the other half that came from the same womb as the human sprinkler, there's Chunhyang. When a new boy who had just joined the school was seated next to the girl, he felt such intense heat that it was almost unbearable. I was about to mock the guy's jacket, but the people around him were practically stripping because of the sauna that the room had become in the girl's presence. Clueless about what was happening, Chunhyang innocently asked what was going on, until she accidentally spat a flame, which was the last straw, or rather, the last drop, for her to be immediately transferred to another school. After that event, Chunhyang also began to isolate herself from other children due to her unconventional characteristics. Years later, when she and her brother entered the same high school, their parents pleaded with the two to look out for each other. However, as expected, the twins soon began to wreak havoc in the school as a double trouble duo. The boy helped his friends make it rain, so they could skip gym class in the open field, while the girl continued to roast the temperature of any room she entered, driving her classmates crazy with the inferno she caused. Due to the high level of shenanigans caused by this troublesome duo, which, like something straight out of a feel-good afternoon movie, stirred up all sorts of chaos in the school, their parents were emotionally drained and didn't know how to deal with so much out-of-control trouble from the kids. This led to an extreme measure. They placed the two under the care of the special police, which was the ideal place for teenagers with super abilities who didn't know how to control their powers, as well as offering the promise of a bright future for the two. Considering the twins had reached the minimum age to join the police force, Doryeong and Chunhyang became part of the rookie team and were now fully integrated into the agency. Today, the duo's mission was to stop Black from escaping, but Chunhyang was furious when she realized the rascal had vanished without a trace. So, she unleashed her classic fire breath like a dragon eating chili peppers. She vowed to catch that criminal next time, without fail, but despite her promises to the wind, and the fire blazing on the lower floors of the building where Doryeong was, the truth was that Black had once again managed to flee. The next day, Rosa Park was reflecting heavily on yesterday's mess at the college. However, despite everything, she had received a sweet touch on the cheek from that fine piece of man. So it wasn't all a total failure. In the middle of this delightful memory, Rosanya dropped her mechanical pencil, and when she went to pick it up, she heard someone mention that Han Doryeong had come to the school today to protect everyone from Black. Gripping the chair tightly, Rosa wondered if, by any chance, the officer had discovered that she was Black, and the mere doubt about this subject made the poor girl want to hide in any hole she could find along the way, like under the desk where she was sitting. Noticing the young lady's emotional breakdown, a classmate assumed Park was trying to hide, but concluded that wasn't a great spot for it. Anyway, it was the best she could manage at the moment, so she had to deal with the consequences. Upon seeing a man with chiseled legs approaching her, the girl thought about what she could say to the student, then concluded that it would be a good idea to return the snot-covered handkerchief he had lent her. With that in mind, before she could fully prepare herself for the conversation, the guy startled her, causing her to bump her head on the table. Embarrassed and panicked, the girl hurriedly returned the booger-filled cloth to the guy. But it wasn't Doryeong. It was just some random guy passing by. A handsome new boy in the area with angel wing ears and a charm so unforgettable that everyone around was left speechless as they saw him interacting with Rosa Park. Upon receiving the snotty handkerchief, the guy promised he would use it very well in his grotesque solo adventures of amusement, which he nicknamed the Journey of Self-Pleasure. Amid all this, Rosanya froze, almost awakening a new ability out of sheer shock. When she realized what she had just done, she tried to retrieve the handkerchief, but the cheeky guy wasn't willing to give it back. According to the crowd around them, who were now confessing everything in Spanish, this man's name was Manhwa Capped. The mental uproar caused by his beauty was so overwhelming that people were suddenly switching languages out of the blue. Anyway, the guy sat next to Rosanya as the roll call for the play began. So, as the names were called, Rosa didn't give up and asked once again for the scoundrel to return her damned handkerchief. But since the gossipers sitting right behind her weren't giving the poor girl any peace, she found herself in an emotional Gaza Strip and couldn't communicate with the guy the way she wanted to. To make things worse, the boy tucked the handkerchief into his pocket and pretended the conversation wasn't directed at him, leaving the girl seething. Frustrated, she resorted to begging him, for the love of God, to return the damn thing. Finally, Siep acted like he had no idea what she was talking about, but asked her to wait a moment before he returned the much-desired item. With that, he wrote his phone number on Park's hand, leaving her completely flustered. According to the smug guy, having his number was the highest honor a human being could achieve on Earth as a member of society. Then, the voice on the roll call asked if Rosa Park was still around. Meanwhile, at the special agency, Jang Seon was explaining to some colleagues that Black's teleportation ability could carry anyone with them, as long as the criminal was touching them during the act, and that the patrol should capture the villain immediately if they found him. The duo, listening to those instructions, was internally trembling with fear after digesting those harsh words, but they kept their feelings bottled up. Amid this, Doryeong, who was standing nearby, noticed something strange in the bushes behind him, so he turned his full attention to the spot, feeling puzzled when he didn't see anything. Jang Seon, who was still giving his team instructions, noticed Doryeong's odd behavior and asked what the guy was doing with his hand inside the trash can. He assumed the blonde guy was exhausted from overworking and was starting to lose his mind, while Doryeong explained that he was certain he had heard someone back there, and it wasn't the voices in his head this time. Unsure how to handle this, Seon bade him farewell and suggested he not dwell on it. With that, Doryeong himself, began considering that he might be losing his mind from exhaustion. But he quickly dismissed the idea when he discovered that his suspicions weren't unfounded. Indeed, someone had been lurking. However, to the hero's surprise, it wasn't anyone threatening. Quite the opposite. It was none other than innocent Rosa Park, who certainly couldn't be suspected of being responsible for all the chaos in the story. Lifting the girl from the bushes, the guy asked what was going on, and she explained that she had been hiding because of the patrol. He wanted to know what that was all about, but the girl changed the subject by mentioning that she had lost the handkerchief he had lent her. Doryeong, for his part, downplayed the issue, saying it wasn't important, so she shouldn't worry her pretty little head about it. Hearing these words, Rosa was flooded with the memory of Siep still asking her to message him later on WhatsApp, which wasn't exactly what she wanted. Her most carnal desire was to return the damned handkerchief to the blonde officer's hand. But to her surprise, Siep wasn't the only one who wanted to have a private chat with the girl, as Doryeong expressed the same desire by asking for Rosa Park's phone number in person. Faced with this, the girl silently celebrated as if it were the most historic event of her life, all while quickly pulling out her phone to finally achieve this significant milestone in her troubled love life. However, when she handed over the device, Rosa accidentally displayed the number Siep had written on her hand, prompting her to snatch it back at lightning speed, wondering what the hell she would say if asked about it. Fortunately, Doryeong didn't even bring it up and seemed genuinely happy to have the chance to see his new friend again soon. Moreover, taking advantage of the moment, he wanted to thank her because yesterday, when he faced Black, he didn't feel that same fear he used to. The downside was that he had tried to remove the gas mask from the villain but hadn't succeeded. Hearing these revealing words, Ms. Rosa Park pulled her hoodie tightly over her face, digesting the sad truth that Doryeong's gesture wasn't a sweet, tender caress. It was his attempt to unmask the most wanted criminal of the past few weeks. Suddenly, Jang Seon approached Doryeong, asking who this girl was that the young officer was spending time with. But before he could answer, Doryeong was startled by Rosanya's sudden disappearance. This made him think that maybe the cow had indeed gone to the slaughterhouse. Insanity had triumphed over sanity. The box had opened too wide, and his brain had fallen out. Song made sure to comment that Doryeong should see a doctor, but the blonde guy insisted he wasn't crazy, just as any good crazy person would. In the end, sometimes Rosa was just shy, Doryeong mused to himself. But another factor weighed on his mind at that fateful moment. Contrary to what Rosanya had assumed, he had indeed seen the number written on her hand. And if that wasn't enough, the guy had an elephant's memory, so he mentally replayed the digits over and over again. Meanwhile, Diana was severely scolding her daughter for hiding her identity. The daughter argued that she hadn't intended to do anything wrong with this, but the old woman was only interested in beating her offspring to a pulp, as that was the only language Diana knew and respected. According to the woman, her daughter had caused a lot of pain to the family. As Rosa hurried in and announced she was going to bed early, Diana's mind was racing with suspicion. When she entered her granddaughter's room, hoping to discuss something, she discovered that Rosa had pulled a fast one and disappeared from home, causing the old lady to nearly demolish the wall with her powerful right hand. Speaking of Rosanya, she had dressed up as Black to roam the streets, resuming her mission to prove to the public, and especially to Doryeong, that this villain wasn't as bad as everyone thought. The problem was that the poor girl just didn't have much luck. Everything she did seemed to backfire and produce the opposite of what she intended, as if she were stuck in a spider's web. Personally, I found that metaphor pretty lame, but since Rosanya seemed to like it, we'll stick with it. After all, she's the one who dictates the narrative here, not me. Well, maybe she came up with that analogy after literally encountering a spider's web right in front of her, where the arachnid sat with its 10 little legs and scary appearance. Realizing the situation, the most feared villain in South Korea let out a scream like no other, as loud as a train horn. Completely out of control, she spun around, frantically trying to figure out where the spider had gone after her freakout. Her fear was so intense that the poor thing believed the spider might have crawled inside her gas mask, so her immediate reaction was to remove it. However, as we know all too well, Rosanya's luck is anything but good. So as fate would have it, a passerby with an ice pop in hand happened to witness the whole thing and discovered that Black was, in fact, a woman.